Good evening YouTube, I'm Chucky2009 and tonight we're going to be doing a little bit of walking the cup. I'm just out here in the shop and I figured I'd put this video together. Why you ask? Because I'm a TIG certified, socially awkward 20-year-old who makes YouTube videos about welding in his mom's garage. And a few people have asked to see this YouTube video, so I figured why not. And so, you know, I got a nice assortment of stuff laid out. I got my TIG torch. We're actually, fun fact, using my Scratch Start TIG rig, because I have a bunch of requests for Scratch Start videos, and we're just running that off the old stick mate here. So we got that. I got a couple of inside corner joints because I honestly feel like those are the easiest way to start walking the cup, and then we'll do it on an open root joint and go from there. Alright, so I guess to start off, what is walking the cup, you ask? Well, simply put, it's when you take yourself a TIG torch like this, and that pink thing, as you know, is referred to as the cup. And what you do is you take your TIG torch and you set it inside the joint, and you pretty much just pivot that cup back and forth, make your way down the joint. You can get a nice little weaving effect, you know, a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. This actually isn't walking the cup, this is wiggling the cup because, as you can see, we're just wiggling our way down there. If I was walking the cup, I could do that on this outside bevel, and that's, they call it walking, it's really more of a pivot, but I'm going to show you all how to do both, and I'll give you a demonstration in each of them. So, alright, we got that, you know, inside corner joints, that 1/8 inch filler metal is what we're going to be using. We got some 3/32 inch 2% thoriated tungsten. I'm pretty sure these are the thoriated ones. I don't know, I sharpened them up to both ends. And, you know, we're going to be setting up an open root joint. So we got that, we got our gloves, we got a couple wire brushes. TIG, as you know, does not like any sort of contamination whatsoever. You know, walking the cup looks really complicated, but to an extent, there's really nothing to it but to do it. So, alright, first off, we're going to do a nice dry run down one of these inside corner joints, and then we're going to fire up the welder and do it for real. Now, why an inside corner joint, you ask? Well, because quite simply, this requires very little metal, it requires very little prep work, and when you're welding it, because it's a flat position weld, you don't have to worry about putting the bead all up on one side and preventing gravity from sucking it back down, and it's the hardest to screw up weld joint. Don't get me wrong, I've screwed up plenty of them myself, but you know, if you start to go up one side of the joint too far, you just fall back in, you don't have bevel edges to worry about, nothing like that. So I feel like a flat position inside corner joint is probably going to be the way to go if you've never done this before. Now we're going to be welding with what's referred to as the lay wire technique because, to nobody's great surprise, you just take your wire and you lay it into the joint, and then you take your TIG torch and you pretty much just run it over. Well, another thing to keep in mind is that you can't just rest your filler wire in there like I was kind of doing. It's looking at the camera. You have to, because if you do, you can slide around, or you know, you move your body a little bit to reposition yourself for the weld, and this just slips and goes forward and impales your tungsten. That's a really bad time. This is more of an issue on pipe than it is in a 1G inside corner weld. Again, you know, probably not a bad way to start out. But it's a good habit to be in, to put a little bit of downward pressure on your filler metal. You know, this is just mild steel ER70S6 filler, so it's going to bend a little bit. Now, I wouldn't do this right here. If I was welding right here, I'd be a few more inches up the joint. But all you do is you put a little bit of downward pressure, and you don't have to, you know, bend the piece of filler wire or anything. Just enough pressure to hold it in place, and then you just run over the end of it here. Now, another thing to keep in mind is this is more wiggling the cup than it is actually walking the cup. If I was walking it, it'd be more of a pivoting. See, I can't even really simulate that. We're pretty much just wiggling it back and forth, side to side, and we are making our way on down the weld joint. Now, I highly, highly, highly recommend you make a few dry runs down the joint without, you know, without the welder turned on, without any gas flowing. Just to get the feel for what exactly you're going to be doing, just sort of watch yourself and work your way down the joint. And what you might want to do is experiment with a few cups. If you're teaching yourself this out in your garage or whatever, I highly recommend getting, to start off with, a number 6, a number 7, and a number 8. Now these are in 1/16 inch sizes. So for instance, the number 6 cup is going to be 6/16 of an inch, which is 3/8. So this inside opening here is about 3/8 of an inch. You know, to be honest, I'm not too particular about cup sizes. I know some people are for some things. I don't know. I guess I had the 7 on here. I kind of played with this before, but I think a number 7 would be good for this type of joint, assuming you're running a 3/32 inch tungsten. You know, if you use too small of a nozzle, you won't get quite enough gas flow. You know, in order to walk the cup or wiggle the cup, you have to have something to wiggle it against, and here on the edge, like where you can see I've tack welded it to the bench down here, there's not really anywhere to do that. So what you have to do is replicate that motion with what's known as the freehand method, which would be to go kind of like this, not resting the cup on anything, not moving it side to side, until you get into the joint and you can rest it on the sides and then move it against the sides. But you know, freehand, it's not really better or worse, it's just one of those things you use as the situation calls for it. And I'm not really going to get into that in this video because it's a walk in the cup video. So just for practice, assuming you've never done this before or anything, I'm actually going to start with the cup on the ends of the thing, and we're going to not weld probably a ½ inch here just because, you know, basic beginner video, we're not going to worry about it. So let's go fire up the welder. And now we're just going to crank up the good old Hobart stick bait. Now, like I said, I'm running a scratch start TIG rig, which means no high frequency, no aluminum, pretty much just DC current and adjusted at the welder, no remote. So, alright, we're pretty much just going to fire this thing up. As you can see, we're already on electrode negative, and we're reading a little over 90 amps. It feels like this is probably about 100. I'd recommend starting this somewhere between about 90 and 110. Just depending if you like to weld a little bit hot or a little bit cold, and you know, realistically we have no idea how accurate that dial is. I love the welder, but I don't think it's very accurate. So we got that, and if we open up our gas flow thing, you'll see that we are running a little over 20 CFH of argon. Yeah, about 20 is good. Alright, so let's do it. See how I'm moving that torch back and forth, YouTube? Just kind of pivoting. And that's all there is to it, YouTube. It's actually quite easy once you get the hang of it. The kicker is it does have one heck of a learning curve. In fact, the first multiple times I did this, it was bad, man. It was really bad. But you know, it's just like with pretty much anything else in welding. All it comes down to is a lot of practice, and you know, you get out of it what you put into it. So one more thing I'd like to just talk about for a second is stick out. Now I like a little bit of a longer stick out than some people, and that gives me a longer push angle. Yeah, that's what it is, a longer push angle. And that spreads out the metal a little bit more. It puts down a thinner layer of metal, but I think it leaves a nicer looking bead than a shorter stick out, thus a smaller push angle and a thicker layer of metal. And that's the stick out I was running. I'd say that's probably a 1/4 inch to 5/16. You know, it's a little bit more than you'd use for some other forms of TIG welding, but with the lay wire technique and the walk in the cup technique, well, that's about how I like it. Now that was so much fun, YouTube. I think we should do it again. As you can see, I've just gone ahead and put the number 8 cup on this torch, because since we're not reaching all the way down into the bottom of the joint, you know, we can have a wider cup that's not gonna reach all the way down into the bottom of the joint. So pretty much I'm just gonna get started here again and wiggle my way across. Kind of hard to do this looking through a camera screen. Alright, I'm trying too hard, just be watching me, I'm nervous. There, that's about what I want. And yeah, we're filling in a wider part of the joint, so I'm gonna be doing a little bit of a wider motion. And this would be the point where wiggling the cup starts to look an awful lot like walking the cup. Now everybody will tell you the walking the cup is somewhat reminiscent of moving like a big steel 55-gallon drum. That seems to be the cliche everybody uses. But you know, when I first heard that, I imagined some kind of side-to-side, banging the edges on the ground kind of deal, kind of like this. But in reality, walking the cup is more like pivoting the cup. You're pivoting along that bottom edge, and you're turning it this way to tie into that side, that way to turn into that side, with a slight rolling action. It's a lot more gentle and controlled than root pass time, YouTube. I'm going to do this just the same way that I did, you know, those inside corner joints. We're pretty much just going to set the wire in there and run it down. So here's my masterpiece, YouTube. Yeah, I pretty much just laid the wire in there and went for it, and as this plate started heating up, I started wiggling it a little bit faster, and that's about what we ended up with. There you can see a nice restart right in here, and when you make a restart on a root pass with TIG, all I do is I will heat up the previously deposited metal. I'll wait for it to keyhole just a little bit. You don't want a lot of keyhole with TIG, especially if you're doing the lay wire, but I like to see that it's all melted, so I let it keyhole just a little bit, then I shove the wire back in there, plug and chug, and keep moving. Now let's flip this thing over. And back here you can see we have a nice, even, smooth, consistent root. And you know, this is what you like to see, because if you're welding on a pipe or something, you put in a root that penetrates like a friggin' 1/4 inch or whatever, something ridiculous, then that can restrict the flow of whatever's going through the pipe, and you know, it can cause turbulence and some other stuff. That's the restart. That's on the back. You can kind of see where it is if you look for it. So let's flip it over and put in another pass. Well, YouTube, I guess we can shut off our argon and turn off the welder, because this weld is officially done. Come on, turn. There we go. Well, there we have a nice flat to maybe slightly convex cover pass, and pretty much all I did was what you saw me do last. You know, you just pivot that thing back and forth. It's not so much of a walk, you know, as in side to side, as it is a pivot. But, you know, like I said, it's just something that comes in time. And anyway, I guess we're going to cut this out. Okay, YouTube, so we got the first piece set up in there. We're actually going to be bending the root first. And, yeah, pretty much just sliced out the straps, flattened them down, and rounded off the corners to prevent corner cracks. So here we go. Are we hitting the weld? I think we're hitting that weld. Alright, testing the face, here we go. That one I think was pretty close. It's only slightly candy cane-ish. As you can see, I got the welds really close to dead on, and if we look on the other side here, you'll see that we got, that's not coming off, that's a spec, YouTube. We have one tiny little speck between these two things, but otherwise they bent totally clean. I really hope that y'all have picked up a thing or two from it. Walking the cup is a really fun technique, and the thing is, when I first learned to do this, the guy that was teaching me said, once you have it, you have it. You can use it on pretty much any joint configuration, and you know, even when you haven't done it in a few weeks, you just practice a little bit and you're right back to it. And I was like, nah, that's crazy the first few times I did it, because my first attempts were not pretty. But, you know, it is what it is. It's a nice technique. Once you understand how to do it and you're over that really steep initial learning curve, then it's pretty easy. You know, you can just sit there and TIG weld things all day. And so I guess, thanks for watching. Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe for more.